Hi guys, welcome to another digital painting tutorial. Today we'll be painting a misty forest landscape. And this is my channel, Creatively Me with Bree. And yes, you guessed it, I am Bree. Before we begin, let's go over the dimensions that we'll be working in. Go to the Actions menu, Canvas, Canvas Information. This is where you can title your work and sign your name. But under dimensions, we are working in 3800 pixels by 5000 pixels at 300 dpi. The color profile that I am working under is the default, which is the second from the top, and I hit done. Now we're going into layers, background color, and I make it a medium gray. It's because it's easier on my eyes as well as easier for the camera to pick up the colors on the canvas. For this piece, I will be working with monochromatic colors, and right now we are working on the first layer that is not the background layer. I am going to the airbrushes and selecting the medium blend brush, and I am just painting across the canvas with a pretty light gray-green. Now I'm going in and creating an even lighter variation from the same color. I'm just tapping in a couple of other varying colors. Just getting down shapes and not worrying too much about how it all looks, because we are going to use Gaussian blur by going to adjustments, going to Gaussian blur, and sliding from left to right. And now we have our sky. I'm going to select the plus sign and add a new layer. On the new layer, which is now going to be layer 2, and I'm selecting a green that is slightly darker than the color in the sky. Now we are selecting the brush, which is under Artistic, and that is the Leatherwood brush. Those of you who have been following along for a little while know how I feel about Leatherwood. It's one of my favorite brushes that come in the Procreate app, especially for organic, natural nature materials. Now, what I just did and what we are going to repeat on a new layer is we are going to grab a slightly darker green. We are going to use the Leatherwood brush to go all the way across the canvas, make sure there are no gaps, and then we're going to color fill. We may not keep these exact shapes or the placement in terms of composition, but we want to get our layers down. And in fact, we end up adding another layer because I just felt like there was space for one more a little bit further down in the project. But you'll see when we get there. Now, going back into layers, we're going to select the furthest mountain in the distance, the one most in the background, and we are going to start creating trees, as well as better defining the shape and the texture of that mountain. What I really love about working with Leatherwood is that you can do this, which it might be difficult to pick up, but hopefully you can see, is that you really can build these really neat textures using the same color. I have not changed the color. I'm still using the same one that I used to build the initial background. It's just the brush itself builds up color and builds up the texture. Now we're creating trees. First, of course, by drawing a vertical line, and then now I'm using the Leatherwood brush to sort of scribble in and create these nice patchy trees. I know that sounds contradictory, but nature is not perfect. So, anywhere that you can put in those just natural inconsistencies will make the piece feel that much more realistic. Like you would with traditional art, make sure that you are stepping back, or in this case, zooming in and zooming out to check the composition of your piece. Here, I found that the line was crooked, so I went into the Selection tool, Freehand, then the Transform tool, and I just moved it until the line was more in line with the rest, mostly vertical. And then I proceeded to paint in those tree branches. And since we're here together, while you draw and I draw these trees, I'm going to take a moment to say I got a new microphone, and this I feel is so much better than before. It's hardly picking up any noise outside of my voice, and the sound quality is just so much better than before. All right, and now I'm going to take the selection tool again, and I'm going to grab all the trees along the edge, and I'm going to shrink them because I realized that they were not small enough for how far back I wanted to push this piece. I really wanted that mountain to be quite far back. And so I had to make the trees significantly smaller. So that is how I dealt with resizing them and moving them. Now we are going to be working on the next layer up. This is the mid layer or the mid ground. So like we did with the background layer, I'm just building up the texture on the side of this mountain and giving the mountainside just some texture to help push this to feel just a bit more real and not too flat. I'm doing both dark and lighter shadows and kind of the illusion of like rock on the side of this mountain, dirt, just like inconsistencies. Maybe that's grass. It's totally kind of up to the eye to determine what it is we think is there. What do you guys see? Now we'll be moving on to the trees. Of course, be thoughtful with placement, but just remember they are movable. We do not have to get stuck with the pieces as we're making them. I try to remind myself of this all the time. It is okay to change your mind, to move things around, repaint, reshape, but don't get too bogged down by where to place everything. We can always play art Tetris a little bit further down in the project if needed. All right, and this is a point where I grab the selection tool, grab the trees, transform tool, and now I'm making them smaller and moving them around just a touch. Now I'm painting where there needs to be a little bit recovery from moving the tree patch, I guess, but it's not too bad. Above the foreground layer, we want to add a new layer and turn that into a clipping mask. I sample the color by holding down and making sure that I grab the color to be a little bit darker and fill that layer. Now I can combine, and underneath that layer and above the other mid-ground layer, I am going to add a new layer. Yes, the word layer is used a lot. I do apologize. And here we are going to add in where I thought there was room for just a little bit more trees. So, and you can see now up close there is a slight color variation. It feels closer, hopefully, than the layers in the background, but definitely not nearly as close as the one in the foreground. Now I'm going to add a tree, as we've been doing. So far, we've only been using leatherwood. Whether it's to draw or erase, it's all been leatherwood. This is the point now where we start adding just a little bit more character and detail to the silhouette of this particular hillside, just to make sure that the piece is, again, feeling like it's more realistic, and then also adding in and layering colors as we had done in the background. Here's a close-up of what it looks like. Now that we have our new mid-ground layer, we want to reconsider or think about the layers behind it. So I go back to the other mid-ground layer, which is above the background layer of trees. And I go back to the initial trees using the selection tool. And then I do copy and paste at the bottom here. So now I can move, resize. Apparently hesitate to move though. That's the important part. Make sure you hesitate good and long to find exactly where to put it. Okay. Continue to second guess yourself and paint here. And then don't forget to erase because you second guessed yourself. And then paint a little bit more. And when you finally have it the way that you want, check how it looks. And in my case, I resize again and move it again, playing Art Tetris. And then I become satisfied. All right, guys, we did it. Look at us go. Now we're going on to the foreground, the closest layer to us, making sure that I'm on the correct layer. My OCD got the best of me there. I felt the compulsion to check because I didn't trust my memory, and I checked. Thankfully, I don't overdo this most of the time on my art tutorials, so that is a relief, but the urge is there. The urge is there, people. Anybody else here have OCD? It's fun, isn't it? So, like the previous layers, I want to brush in the different branches, trying to be conscious of where I'm placing them because I don't want there to be too much symmetry. But I also don't want the tree to be naked. We want a full tree. We want it to be a happy tree, especially since it's the one closest to us. Next, we're going back into layers, and this layer we will be putting on alpha lock so that I can draw slightly lighter colors directly onto the tips of the branches. I am building up to a lighter color. It also wouldn't, while I didn't do it here, it would not have hurt for me to do a layer behind this where I made just slightly lighter colored branches. So it looked like they were catching light more. Okay, let's take off the alpha lock. And this is where we can fill in those places that needed filling, that were open gaps. I'm going to use the eraser, which will be leatherwood, and I'm going to start shaping the edge of the silhouetted hillside, mountainside, whatever you would like to call it. And I'm going to start building up layers of texture similar to the way I did in the other ones. This one will have a little bit more since it is the closest to us. And we want to have this feeling of standing on this hillside, specifically here. With this lighting, though, I don't want to be too detailed or have too much to focus on so that the eye still trails back to the other layers where most of the light will be catching. Once I have my shapes down, I do go back over with a dark color and just lightly brush in to take away some of the intensity. So again, it does not stand out too much, but gives enough of the illusion of maybe ground, dirt, rocks, grass, nature. Here I go back to the layer beneath this and I just touch up this area just to make sure it all looks good. I use the eraser to go back into the tree branches to make sure there aren't any that are too clumped. And you'll see that specifically on this slightly smaller tree. I think it works really, really well. Add a new layer above all the layers. And I end up picking black. I go into the inking brushes. It takes me a second, but I get there. There we go. And I choose the Inka brush. However, I customize it, so I delete this and show you guys how to do it. First, we want to swipe from right to left and hit duplicate. Click on the Inka brush, go down to taper, and these are the only adjustments we will be making. And now we're done. And this is what it looks like. Hit done. I'm going to make sure I get zoomed in and create sort of like bird silhouettes in the sky. They aren't perfect birds. I really need to study my faraway bird silhouettes a little bit better, but I feel like these get the job done. They read well enough, but I would like different birds. Right now it feels like they're seagulls, which is fine. Maybe there's a beach nearby. I didn't tell you. I also don't know the answer, but I'm going to assume if there are seagulls, there's a beach nearby. So now I am just resizing, reshaping, moving until I like how the birds are resting. I do take some time to erase and refine the shape and wings of the birds. Use the selection tool, transform to move. There we go. I try to get this bird to look a little bit less scribbled in. The birds are a bit hard to see on the camera, but they do register in person. Now I'm going down to the sky and I'm adding a new layer above it, selecting the color white, and I'm going all the way down to elements, and I'm going to use the cloud brush provided. I have the cloud shape as well as the opacity turned down so that I can very softly, paint in the clouds. I do want some to show up more so than others, so I am pressing down rather hard so that the clouds have some variation in how they show up. I go into the smudge tool next, since I now have my clouds established. I'm going to the airbrush, and now I'm just very lightly moving and softening some of the edges of the clouds. And I still want some to show up quite clearly, but I don't want it to be too distracting from the overall piece. Next, I'm going to go and create a new layer that is below the clouds but still above the background layer, and I'm going to use the color white to just help these trees in the background show through just a little bit easier. Look at, there they are. We could see them again. We needed that. Heading on back to layers, I'm going to select the first layer in the background of the mountain layers, and I am going to add a new blank layer, the color white, use the cotton brush. I'm going to use the cotton brush as the mist between the different backgrounds and foregrounds. Now I'm going to the next layer up and combining it with the trees that I had duplicated but forgot to merge down. I showed you two different ways here how to do that. Adding a new layer, I am just gently painting in that mist. I end up feeling like there needs to be some additional colors, but this is what I started with. Right there along that edge, it's a little bit too defined, so I go in to the smudge tool, go down to organics and cotton brush, and now you can see me very gently blending and or smudging, however you want to call it, the edge so that it doesn't stand out too sharply, but that it's still present enough that we get the illusion of fog distorting the edge that we would normally see. I select the first mid-ground layer for the mountains and put a new layer on top of that. And then I paint in some darker colors, which is hard to see here. It does not come through until I put it on multiply. And now it comes through. We're going to smudge and make it just blend in a little bit better. I want it to help give texture and the illusion of the mist inconsistently covering the layers. Now I'm going to the next mid-ground layer, and I'm adding a new layer above it, and I will just lightly paint in some fog here as well, but not overdo it. You can always use Gaussian blur if you feel like it's too textured. On this mountain, I am going to use the smudge tool. I'm using the cotton brush again, and I'm just softening up these edges. I feel like that helps the piece so much. And I would say at this point, we're done. Yes, you could, of course, continue to paint, make further adjustments. You could certainly push this even further, but in about 20 to 30 minutes, you could have this. Thank you guys so much for supporting my channel and being here with me today. If you haven't subscribed, please do, and don't forget to engage, like, comment, and share. I'll see you guys real soon in the next tutorial. Okay, bye.